Welcome to Module 3, Thinking About Justice. Last week, we looked at a few definitions of social justice. The authors presented us with the idea that social justice means the state must redistribute the wealth of its citizens. It is presented in a way which appears readily acceptable, because nobody wants to agree with taking away the wealth of hardworking individuals. But we need to ask, is this what social justice is? How is social justice being presented here? It is being presented in a way that's easily refuted, easily knocked down. This is what the logicians call a straw man argument. If we begin with the idea of redistribution, then we are likely to agree with these free market thinkers. But if we begin from a different perspective, a perspective which first asks, what is justice, then we may end up in a different place. If we begin with the assumption that the social world in which we live ought to be fair, rather than jumping right into the ideas of distribution, we might be able to provide alternatives to the dominant modes of thinking on social justice. So this week we are thinking about justice, and what better place to begin than with the ancient Greek philosophers. The main reading this week is Plato's Apology, one of the founding documents of Western philosophy. The Apology takes place in a courtroom where 70-year-old Socrates is on trial. He is accused of corrupting the youth and of impiety against the gods. And while he is defending himself, Socrates tells us about the good life, about religious conviction, about the nature of truth, about political power, and about the philosophical life in general. Out of the Apology, we get three elements that are going to be important for us in thinking about justice. We'll look at the nature of wisdom itself, the philosopher as a gadfly, and various different ideas of justice. While defending himself, Socrates tells us that the unexamined life is not worth living. Socrates is accused of corrupting the youth of Athens by confusing them with his oratory skills. Socrates denies that he has this power, and he says he doesn't have that kind of skill. And it's in this work that we find out that Socrates is considered the wisest man in ancient Athens. During his defense speech, Socrates makes reference to himself in a story that was told by his friend Chaerephon. Socrates' friend asks the oracle if anyone is wiser than Socrates, and the oracle responds that there indeed was no one wiser. Socrates then goes on a mission to find who is wiser, and he addresses the politicians and the poets and the artisan, and he's searching for someone who is truly wiser. But he finds that in each of these cases, there are only people that pretend to know something, and in reality, they do not. Socrates comes to understand that the oracle called him wise because he wouldn't pretend to have knowledge. And knowing that you don't know, we learn from Socrates, is the beginning of the philosophical path to wisdom. Socrates tells his accusers he has been given to the state by the gods. The state was once a great noble steed, but now it is lazy and slow, and it needs a stinging fly to rouse it into action. This idea of a gadfly is the second important part of Socrates' defense speech. The idea is that the power structures, or the political system, has become too lazy, too set in its ways. Once in a while, the power structure needs a kick in the pants because they are concerned with the wrong things. Socrates believes that it is his job to get the state thinking about the right things. Socrates asks the judges to consider the justice of his cause, but he is found guilty of corrupting the youth and is sentenced to death. In the final moments of Socrates' speech, he asks his accusers to trouble his sons as Socrates has troubled his accusers. In this way, Socrates says, justice will be served. It is this passage that I'd like you to be thinking about, and the idea of how troubling someone, about how reproving someone is serving justice. I would also like you to be considering what other kinds of justice we see presented in this work.